joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here for this daily medicine transmission for February 9th, 2021. So we're going to mix the astrology in with today's reading because it really just flows very nicely together as opposed to kind of separating them into separate entities. Sometimes it makes more sense to look at the chart and dissect things from that angle and then see how the reading feeds into it. But much like water, this whole process today is very fluid. So I'm gonna just bring in the astrology as I talk about the reading and give the transmission for today. So I hope everyone is doing well, taking good care of themselves. I posted a little piece yesterday or last night about the Schumann resonance and how it's starting to peak again. I mean, it's not like it has been where it's been at like 6,000, but as these blasts happen into the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, when the Schumann resonance is at its baseline between 7 and 8 hertz. So when it blasts to 50, 60, 70 hertz, people really feel the impact of that change because just like the earth has her own electromagnetic field, we as living bodies have our own electromagnetic field. So there is an impact, and there is more research that is starting to be done to show these connections here. So what are some of the symptoms I've talked about in the past, and many other people are aware of this. This is not something that is necessarily new if you are already tuned into this type of content, but ringing in the ears, restless sleep, headaches, those are some of the major symptoms, very vivid dreams. And so you can check that out on Facebook and in Telegram. I did a whole post that's really about how you can transition yourself into a space where rather than having the symptoms, the quote unquote negative symptoms, as your body, your physical vessel is adjusting to these higher electromagnetic frequency shifts that happen when the Schumann resonance spikes, that when you work with your energy field and you prime your body as an energetic container in some ways, then you can start riding these waves of higher frequency fields, electromagnetic fields, in a way that is actually feels really, can feel really good. And so I would invite you to check that out. Those links are in the description box in terms of social media connections. And I talk all about the ways that you can mitigate some of the symptoms as you're going along and how you can consistently work on your own energetic vessel to be able to hold this higher frequency when it comes about, and how we can really utilize that positively. So at this point, for me, for instance, sometimes when there's a lot of solar activity, I still get the really intense headaches and inflammation in my body. But when the Schumann spikes now, it's really quite remarkable. The ringing in the ears is still a primary symptom, but I also have, the dreams get more vivid. Sometimes sleep is restless and you have to take your rest when your body is asking for it. And sometimes that is not, it's not the most convenient, but, a 20-minute energetic tune-up will go a long way when it comes to these types of things. But your dreams get more vivid, your psychic and intuitive insight gets way deeper and more fine-tuned. Feelings of joy and contentment, just clear thinking, higher energy, multi-dimensional travel, all of these things are these are aspects that can be enhanced when the Schumann resonance is amplified to these higher frequencies. And when I say frequency, it's really not that, it's not that mystical when we talk about it. A frequency is really just the number of wavelength cycles per second. And so the more wavelength cycles per second, right? Light travels in a wave, sound travels in a wave, and electromagnetic energy is light. We just know it as the visible light spectrum, but it is a much larger spectrum of electromagnetic energy. And so when it travels in a higher frequency, that means there are more wavelengths of photons, right? Photonic light, photonic energy, more waves of photons, more oscillations per second. And so that's why with the violet and indigo and blue, the higher chakras, they have a higher frequency of wavelength, which is why you see the color that you do. And so they're higher energy. Anyway, you can check that out and get a sense of maybe how best to move through these spikes, because they are uncomfortable, but it's important that we are actively preparing our vessel, conditioning. It's like priming a pump, right? We want to prime our energy field in order to hold these, because they're happening more often. And this is where the earth as a living entity, an organism, she's already shifted. She's already shifted to the higher dimension. So it's imperative that we are plugging into her network in order for our physical bodies, and the animals too, the plants, the animals, they've already made the shift. And so it's important that we utilize this guidance system and this network to help our bodies make the adjustment too, because we need to be able to hold higher frequency of photonic energy as our solar system moves into a part of the galaxy that has more photonic energy coming. We have to be able to hold it. And this is the difference between moving from a purely based carbon structure to a crystalline structure. And like I said, that's all in the post. I don't need to go back over it. I just want to let you know that it's there. And if you're having these symptoms, it's definitely spiking right now. And so it's not surprising. So I hope you are doing what you need to do to take care of yourself, drinking lots of water, getting the rest that you need, being easy on yourself. So, and there continues to be a lot of fire in the collective energy, okay? And we're going to go over that and how the astrology for today is actually can really help us, again, manage this underlying fire and really what is actually an oppressive force on that vitality. And you can really start to feel, and this has been this way for a lot of the year, but it's really starting to build, and there is so much more pressure pushing down on that vitality as it gets stronger and stronger and wants to be released. And we're not quite there yet. And it's important that we can balance that water energy, the intuitive, flowing, fluid nature of us with that spark of vitality and will to transform. If we are allowing one side or the other to be in control, then this is not balance, and we do need balance. So last night, we watched Bruce Lee's last movie that he made, Enter the Dragon, if you're familiar with that. And so in this movie, he's basically recruited by some intelligence agency, I'm not quite sure which one, to go and infiltrate this particular criminal enterprise that's on this island, which is run by an ex-Shaolin monk. And on this island, he is supposedly running a martial arts school, but he's also trafficking young girls and selling them, and then also making heroin and getting them addicted to the heroin. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It doesn't sound that far off from some other some other situations that we know about, right? And so he is, and because he's a Shaolin monk as well, his teacher wants him also to take this job, because this Shaolin monk is disgracing their lineage. And Bruce Lee, one of the moments towards the beginning of the movie, he's working with a student, and he says to the student, he's just like, you need emotional content. And he makes the differentiation, not anger, emotion. And so Bruce Lee is known for, at least, his philosophy about being like water. And this is really going to help us today because there is a lot of anger. I'm feeling it very much. It's been brewing and is starting to really come up to the surface, and it's meeting a lot of resistance and a lot of oppressive force. And as we're going to see in this reading here and through the course of this transmission, when fire is suppressed, it definitely will find its way of being released, and it may not be in the most constructive way. And this is why being connected to water and the fluid aspect of our consciousness and having emotional content as the force in which we strike our opponent, for instance, rather than anger, is really going to assist us right now. And so with the astrology today, the big transits are, the moon is finishing her transit of Capricorn, but she's going to meet Pluto, and we are in a dark moon, a balsamic moon. That means that we're at the very end of the cycle, right before the new moon happens on the 11th. There is not a lot of reflection on what is going on inside of us in our subconscious, but when the dark moon meets Pluto, there is such a potential for very deep and buried subconscious emotions to start to come up, and they can be very overwhelming. We can be kind of obsessed with them, but there's not a clear reflection because the moon is dark. And even though Pluto and the moon are meeting in Capricorn, the particular degree that they're meeting in has to do with water, has to do with being able to recognize the hidden elements in nature that have to do with water. Water is life. Water is the emotional content that Bruce Lee is talking about in Enter the Dragon. It is the fluid aspect of our consciousness and flows through everything. And so even though we're talking about cardinal Earth with Capricorn, we have Pluto, who rules Scorpio, fixed water. We have the moon, which is our internal emotional landscape, and we're in a degree where they meet that has to do with being able to perceive the underlying fluid water that is pervasive in all life. And when we tap into that, then we flow with it. We don't have to force anything. We don't have to burn ourselves out either when we tap into it, but it will be very deep. A lot of hidden stuff coming up, a lot of buried subconscious feelings that can come up and overwhelm us. Death is very close with a transit like this, and it's death in a lot of different contexts. It doesn't necessarily mean physically, and since Pluto is in Capricorn, we are still looking at the collective institutions and structures that we all are participating in creating. The moon is also in a sextile to Neptune in Pisces. And this, again, is going to allow us to tap into our particular individual role within a collective creation of something resonant. It's about the choir, the hidden choir in a church service or a religious service. Each individual is part of the whole, and the whole is creating this acoustic resonance that is not at the forefront, but is providing the framework for this collective transcendent experience. And if we can find our own individual role within that, and again, tap into the flow of that, and tap into Neptune in Pisces, right? Again, just dissolving all the boundaries, connecting directly to source at this point and allowing that to flow into us so that we can each individually allow that to move through us. Again, this is really going to assist us today with a lot of fire and a lot of anger and rage that is really starting to push its way up and be even more and more pushed down. You can really feel it. I know I can really feel this anger and rage really bubbling up and brimming very strongly. And the south node of the moon, which is really the only fire other than Juno. Asteroid Juno is in Sagittarius, coming very close actually to the south node. They're only 2 degrees apart. They're sitting right on my Mars right now, and so in my 11th house. So I am feeling it. And this is this is a message that I think we all really need to prepare ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to get right into the reading so we can see what it is I'm actually talking about. Okay, let's minimize my face here. All right, I'm going to check in with the stream chat real quick and make sure everything is going as it needs to. All right, yes, wonderful. Hi, Meg, it's good to see you. I always look forward to seeing you in this space. Okay, so here we go. Here is our reading for today. This is the basis of this daily medicine transmission. So we have lust or passion reversed coming into the moment, number 11, and then we have the 10 of wands. Also, so you can see the fire right here. Both of these aspects inverted. The 10 of wands is the end of a cycle. It is oppression. It is Saturn in Sagittarius, okay? We have the 4 of keys clearing the way as the top of our awareness. Number 13, the Buddha prepares. And if you are familiar with the traditional tarot, number 13 is the death card. So at the root of things energetically is the Buddha prepares. And the outcome here is adjustment, number 8, the justice card. And so even as we are experiencing some real inversion in our passion, on our lust in some ways, right? You can feel it brimming and coming up to the surface, that animal desire. And I will tell you too, Black Moon Lilith today is in a degree in Taurus that is about violent aggression for survival, because that is part of living in a physical material world. And as a physical material being, is that survival is part of our ego psyche. And it's part of interacting with the material natural world, is a drive to survive. And Black Moon Lilith is all about the survival of the dark feminine, right? The wanting to be, that aspect of us wanting to be in power, okay? And so we have to be very careful today for those of us who are on the ascension pathway. It's very easy, and for everybody really, this is a collective read, but it's very easy that we can get caught up in this aggressive struggle for survival, especially that part of ourselves that absolutely wants to bring in power and overpower the masculine as well. Very strong today, okay? So as we come into the moment, let's look at this here. All right, so passion, lust, the animal desire, number 11 is in a reversal. And so there is a weakness here and a lack of satisfaction. So what is passion and lust? Well, it's the Leo card. It is the power that, it is that animal aspect of us that stimulates our will to create from our own self, to express ourself. That is what Leo represents. And it's number 11. So you're talking too about the twin flame kind of energy. It is when we individually, and this is the 5th house too, what is it that gets us in passion to create something? That is what this really represents. And so when it's reversed like this, there's weakness, there's dissatisfaction, there's potentially depression, but it really also feels like that there is a strong inversion of this desire and this passion, because it is in some ways flipped around. It's not being fully expressed, it's not being allowed to be fully expressed, or it's being inappropriately expressed. And the animal side of us is not being utilized to create something new necessarily, but is being pushed down or not allowed to come out in its fullness as we come into the moment. And you can really, there's so many aspects that are surrounding us that are keeping the individual person from really bringing the fullness up to the surface and out in creative expression. Now, that's not the case. That doesn't mean that we need to identify ourselves as a victim necessarily, or that we can't find other ways. But when we do feel suppressed, or if we do feel that we can't fully express ourselves, then what ends up happening is, so we have the 10 of Wands, oppression. Saturn in Sagittarius. So you can see the two big metal iron rods here in front of all the other wands. That is an oppressive force. So even when it's upright, the oppression is, it represents something that we have to work with and accept, because it is the end of a cycle. And fire is not meant to be pushed down. A spark of life and our vitality is not meant to be pushed down to the ground, which is what Saturn in Sagittarius really is doing, is that the boundaries and this restriction of Saturn, right, is pushing down on this creative potential that the fire represents. So, but when it's reversed, this is even worse, because it's excessive pressure, cruelty, dogmatism, aggression. See, I just talked about with Black Moon Lilith, aggression, material ends. That is really what it's doing. And you can feel it right now, that the more people are trying to allow this part of themselves to come out and up, come up and out, right? The expression of our most basic, lion sovereign selves, there is definitely restriction trying to push it back down. And the thing about fire is that it'll find a way to burn, right? But this is where we can get into trouble, right? Because it will find a way to burn, but it's usually going to be in a way that is excessive or cruel or dogmatic or very aggressive, rather than allowing the cycle to end and start a new one, right? The Ace of Wands, right, would be the next phase of this, where we start with a new transformative principle. This is just, acting out because we're being oppressed and oppressed and oppressed, okay? Now, as where the top of the awareness is right now, is we have this clearing the way. Okay, I'm trying to get it to, there's so many. Yeah, clearing the way, you can see it. So the Four of Keys, it's pretty obvious imagery here. We have this big log in front of the carriage. The man and the woman get out. He has an axe, so he has a tool. And you can see their home is in the background here. This is the pathway home through the forest, but they have to clear this obstacle out of the way. So it's a pretty self-explanatory. Now, we want to move these obstacles out of the way. It's pretty clear. And we do feel like it's time to take significant action. And I'm not suggesting that that we shouldn't, but it's important that we are aware of what is stimulating our significant action. Because if we do not temper that action with some calm and some forethought and being like water, right? Emotional content, not anger and rage, because boy, oh boy, that passion reversed and that 10 of Wands reversed, that is some oppressed energy that is going to come out as rage. If we do not temper that with some calmness and some forethought, we can do so much damage, and that's not going to help anything. So when in the movie, when Bruce Lee goes to the island, right, he has to temper his own rage. Like, he has his sister ends up committing suicide, because rather than being recruited by this person and his thugs, they were trying to recruit her to the island, and so she ended up killing herself rather than going with them. And so then it became very personal for him, but yet he had to still maintain that emotional content in order for him to execute the mission, right? Which was a total takedown of the entire operation. Had he gone in there with all of his rage and anger seething, he wouldn't have been able to do what he did. He would have burnt himself out. He would have done some damage to himself, to the operation. He had to be thorough. He had to be poised. He had to temper his, that spark and that vitality in order to use it at the right time. So we could do some damage. And so there is a lot of focus that we got to get this obstacle out of the way. We see it. We know we have the tools to do it. We're out and we're ready to go. We want to get home, right? We want to get back to home, to the essence of who we are. And it's important that we're determined and strong. It's not that these things aren't necessary. it's important to realize that if we come out blazing, right, we're going to wear ourselves out, we're going to do damage without actually getting anything out of the way, and we might not actually remove the obstacle that we need to remove fully, right? We want to make sure we fully clear the way, okay? Now, if we can connect to this energetic root here the Buddha prepares, right? Here's the moon meeting Pluto, right? Number 13. This is the death card. Inner preparation before our action. I know that people don't want to hear this. I know that people are really getting sick and tired of waiting for certain things to happen, but it's important with this transit today that we reach within to find our power, because the time is coming. We do see that it's time to clear the way. It's right there in front of us, but we still have to gather our resources, do the inner preparation. And if we are not preparing for moon meeting Pluto today like this, we could be very overwhelmed by what comes out of that. The time is coming. It really is. We have just got to give ourselves the opportunity to really go within and gather our power, instead of just like bursting out in one flash and then not having enough left in order to do what needs to be done. We can't just like go in there guns a-blazing, right? Bruce Lee had to take out from top to bottom, and he had to keep his composure the whole time. And if he couldn't let anger, he had to be like water, okay? So, because the adjustment is coming, the justice, right? Number 8. Number 8 is the divine intervention, right? This is the justice card. This is Libra, right? This is uncompromising objectivity and honesty, harmony between our reality and our instincts. It is coming. And this can be, again, this can be in any measure of experience, any type of event in our lives. I mean, it's going to be from the global scale all the way down to the microcosm within the inner realm. And so however you need to connect to this is where the adjustment is going to happen. There's a realization of cause and effect that also goes on. And there's a strong Saturn here, very strong Saturn, that goes along with this. And actually Saturn in Aquarius is in a sextile today to Chiron in Aries. So there is a lot of strong structure and boundary and responsibility that goes along with what we are creating, what is emerging in this next phase of Aquarius, right? Being born of the cosmic egg means that we are leaving behind all of our ancestral karma. This is the emergence of a new archetype of human and a collective. The sextile to Chiron in Aries, the potential here is if, we could either allow ourselves we could take the responsibility of where we're headed, and allow that to influence this healing, right, of our inner wounding, right, and then not acting out of that and ruining the whole operation, right? There's a responsibility here of what is emerging and what we're creating, and there are very firm boundaries around this. There is a cosmic egg, and that shell is a very firm boundary that we have to come out of. And if we're still, especially with Aries, it's all about being inside the seed still. It's all, especially early Aries, it's all about those processes within the seed. We can't break out of the seed if because eventually to germinate, that sprout is going to have to break out of that seed. But if we continue to kind of play the victim still, right? If we are still wrapped up in the identity of being a victim and like, oh, why is this happening to me? Why can't the seed just open and realize that we have to break out of it? There's a potential here for, again, a lot of healing and taking some responsibility for what we're creating. And with this adjustment, you can see this is very angular, but at the same time, there's all these spheres around it, and balance and very firm, Okay, there is a responsibility here, and there is a boundary that has to be cracked open in order to emerge as a new person. And if we are still spinning around in our woundedness of Chiron, and trying and not really, I would say not really, really acknowledging that we have to eventually break out of the seed if we want to grow into something new, then we're going to miss our opportunity. So the adjustment is coming, but we have to see it for what it is, and we have to take some responsibility for the work that needs to go into it. And it is uncompromising, right? There's no room in here in Libra. There is the scales. And so when one side adjusts, you put weight on one and the other side adjusts, there's no, I don't want to say there's no middle ground, because there is eventually when you find the balance, but it's a very distinct experience. And so when one side shifts, the other side has to shift accordingly. And there's no spinning around in the middle of it, just, in our woundedness. It's just, there's no room for it. So there is, again, we can really heal from some things today as a result of this sextile, Saturn and Chiron in this sextile. We have to participate in it though, right? It's harmonious, but it requires us to participate in order to get that, get the most out of that aspect. So the adjustment is coming, the justice is coming, the uncompromising honesty and objectivity is coming. And the fire and the adjustment, because of the oppressive force on our vitality, is part of that. But we can't let that be the only thing that is influencing how we act, because otherwise it's not going to, we're not going to take any responsibility for what we're creating if we're just, again, that Chiron aspect. And then Black Moon Lilith, that is about violence, aggression for survival. We have to tap into the water, right? We have to tap into that fluid, intuitive, emotional content if we really want to execute real justice, which is what Bruce Lee did. I mean, he just destroyed everybody. And he ended up, taking out the head guy. Very interesting. So there's some guidance here to help with this process if we are struggling. Number one, when it comes to the Four of Keys, this is the scribe. This is the card that comes before the Buddha prepares. This is number 12. This is the end of a cycle. This is really, rather than trying so hard to clear the way, again, gathering our resources, and this is our mental resources, our informational resources. And Mercury right now is in an interesting degree today, which is about a forest fire being subdued, right? So think about that way, that our minds and what we can gather, pulling in of our resources, our emotional resources, our informational resources, we're taking in and taking in and taking in. Again, gathering and gathering and gathering to prepare for when the time to move. This is why these practices of Tai Chi and Qigong are actually so important to a successful martial arts practice, because you do have to cultivate and gather in that energy and be able to hold it in order to then have it flow out. And so pulling in the information, pulling in our resources, making sure that we have all the information. And the scribe is just somebody that's, was the recorder of all the holy scriptures, but really they are recording everything. And so they're learning everything. Law and literature and history and architecture. And so just pulling in as much information as you can, rather than just blindly acting out of our rage, would be really helpful. And along with that, we have the chameleon again. And so stay in the background and adapt to the situation, rather than being, number one, conspicuous, right? When we are lashing out in rage, we're very conspicuous, and attempting to direct the course of events. Again, be like water, flow with it. And this is about blending into the background. And so while we're gathering in our information, we are not being conspicuous. We're not trying to direct anything. We're gathering our resources. We're pulling it in. We're being adaptable. We are being like water in this situation, okay? And when it comes to the Buddha prepares, the cat, so here's our Lyran influence again. Time to strike out on our own and relinquish our overdependency. So being able to pull ourselves in and be still and gather our power, it will require a measure of autonomy and independence and resourcefulness and courage, right? We want to relinquish this over dependency. We don't want to be dependent on other aspects to give us a sense of power and be able to be still in ourselves, right? This again comes back to relying on other people's intel, relying on other people's conception of reality, getting caught up in other people's reports of what's happening, even getting caught up of what you think you're seeing on, in any type of all of media, right? You want to pull in your resources, okay, and not be reliant on what's outside of you in this moment. Because who we need, here's our Queen of Forces again, the balance between the feminine water and the masculine fire. Her ability is, she's very powerful because she can do this. And this is really, when we pull in and gather our resources, we are allowing ourselves the ability to hold this space. And when we can do this, then we can actually engage with that justice or adjustment that is coming, but not unless we are really holding this frequency of balance of the water and the fire. We have to find it. We have to, and it's hard right now. Like I said, the anger is brimming. We want to lash out. And even if we don't have something right in front of us that we can fight, it's important that we are keeping our energy in this balanced position as well. With our words, with our thoughts, with our behaviors, towards just people in our lives, right? Instead of succumbing to that rage and that anger that just because then we project it out on people who it's not even, completely inappropriately. And then we are losing our energy, which is what they want. They want us to lash out and leak energy and not have and lose our vitality. And this whole transmission is about how we can maintain that vitality for the moment where we do need to put it towards use and clear the way. But right now, we're not quite there. And the astrology is pretty clear that we're not quite there yet. So we're in a dark moon. This is not a time to be making big, bold moves, especially with a Mercury retrograde. Now, the new moon, that's going to be a different story, and we'll talk about that soon. But in the meantime, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Be like water. Tap into the emotional content. Let that flow, guide you as opposed to lashing out and trying your best to get that obstacle out of the way because you're just going to burn yourself out. So that's the transmission for today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I'm going to check in with the chat real quick here. Let's see. This is accurate. The oppressive pressure of creative energy, the seed, the cocoon, the womb, all of it. It's so important to recognize our shadows and stop projecting and be responsible. Oh boy, that is a big one. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. It's really important. There have been some interactions I've been witness to in the last couple of days that are so much that, and it's even watching other people do it will then bring that anger out in you, right? When you're just you're watching other people project their shadow and not be responsible, and then it just stimulates it in you too, and it's this never, this really destructive cycle if you're not the one who is able to put a stop to it. It's really important right now that we are able to manage this. And the Schumann blasting can really help if we tap into it and we have the container. And we can't have the container to hold that higher frequency if we are constantly projecting our shadow, if we are living in these, in this feedback loop of negativity. I'm not saying that you can't have negative feelings. That's ridiculous. we have to be honest with ourselves and our emotions. But if we are living in that feedback loop constantly, we're not going to be able to hold the higher energy. So that's important to realize as well. So if you're interested in reading, you can book it through the website. That's in the description box. Feel free to reach out through email. You can always donate to this work. This is my offering, but there is an option to donate. It's also in the description box. And yeah. Find me on Telegram, find me on Facebook. I'm also uploading these videos now to BitChute. So if you're interested in alternative tech and being live is not something that you really doesn't matter to you, then you can start getting these transmissions on BitChute as well. So take care, guys. I will see you tomorrow for the transmission. Bye.